ECDC On Air,
the podcast of the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control.
Keeping up to date with European epidemiology.
Hello, welcome, and thanks for tuning in to the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control audio series, ECDC On Air. I'm your host Lee, recording from our headquarters in Stockholm, Sweden. Through the past year and a half, you may have heard of ECDC being mentioned here and there, but you may be unfamiliar with what actually goes on here in Stockholm when we're not talking about the COVID-19 pandemic. As an EU agency, ECDC aims to strengthen Europe's defences against infectious diseases. We cover a wide range of subjects, including surveillance, preparedness, epidemic intelligence, and response measures. We provide scientific advice, give public health training, and raise awareness through our disease programs. Put simply, we do quite a lot. Earlier this year, in our second episode titled Looking for Signals, we spoke with Thomas Mollet about epidemic intelligence and how it works at ECDC. Today, we're taking a look back at the 31st of December 2019 and how the EI officer on duty that day reacted to reports of patients showing signs of a pneumonia of unknown etiology. It is easy to forget what things were like 2 years ago. In one sense, it doesn't seem all that long ago, but things were very different for everyone, including us here at ECDC. Jordi Borrell Pique was on duty for that final week of 2019, and with the second anniversary of COVID-19 soon upon us, we thought it would be a good idea to sit down and speak with him for a more personal look at those early days when he first saw the COVID-19 signals. I'd like to welcome Jordi Borrell Pique here with us today. Jordi, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So before we jump right into what we're going to talk about today, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? So what is your background and how did you come to ECDC?
Sure. So I'm a nurse as a background. I was graduating actually in 2008 and shortly after began to work as an ICU nurse in the hospital from my city. After 3 or 4 years, I had the opportunity to go to work as well to Equatorial Guinea in Africa, where I was living roughly almost 2 years in there. That was a really nice experience that I had that made me realize I wanted to specialize in the public health field. So then I came back to Europe and I decided to do my specialization, my master's degree in public health here in Sweden, in the University of Gothenburg. And it was there when it was the first time that I've heard about ECDC. So I applied for one of the trainee positions available and I got selected for the Epidemic Intelligence position as a trainee. That was 2017. And then shortly after my traineeship, there was the opportunity of having a staff position as well. And here I am since then.
Okay, so could you tell us more about what your role here is at ECDC? What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
So I'm working in the Epidemic Intelligence team as a scientific officer. My main aim is the early detection of threats for the interest of the European Union. So on a daily basis, the way that we're scheduling our work and structuring a bit is that we have at least 2 or 3 people doing monitoring of the different media aggregators in order to detect precisely these signals that could pose a risk for the interest of the European Union. So everything follows an EI process. As soon as you detect a signal, this signal has to pass through a different steps. One is the verification of this signal. So that means that you have to contrast the information that you have found in the media against official sources. You have to see whether that information it's reliable. You can trust it. If it's an ongoing incident that you are investigating, it's real. And after that, you need also to give a short assessment of what this signal, what this event that you're investigating could mean. Then also we need to report this to the senior officials. We're having on a daily basis as well something here in ECDC that we call roundtable report and roundtable meeting, where all these senior officials, they are gathering and discussing these findings in order to assess these signals and to communicate later on to our stakeholders, mainly the Commission, the European Commission, and also the European Union member states and the European Economic Area member states.
Okay, so we've heard a little bit previously about epidemic intelligence from Thomas Mollet, and he spoke about this signal screening as well. He mentioned a list, a criteria. What is this criteria that helps with the screening process?
we have to apply this criteria because otherwise anything could qualify even for the roundtable. In plain words, what something or an item that might be very relevant for, I don't know, let's say a country such as Papua New Guinea might not be that specifically important for our interest and the way around. So that's why we need to apply this criteria. This is a set of very specific criterion, like how unusual or unexpected is an event, if this event could pose a risk for the free movement of people or trade between countries. Also at the European Union level, what we are focusing so much is if an event is ongoing on a territory or has the risk to expand to a second member state or a third member state even, that would be something as well that would trigger our attention to take further actions. So also if something is taking a lot of media attention, it's something that would be also relevant for us. Mass gatherings is something that we are monitoring closely as well. And there is many other more specific criteria that we are also following and assess when we detect one of these signals.
So you said you've been here since 2017 here at ECDC. Can you remember what your first Christmas periods were like when you first came here? Were they quite quiet? What was the focus on?
Yeah, they were nice, actually. Yeah. Also, we have the opportunity to travel back home by that time. Of course, there is always a team on duty, even during this Christmas time period. But my first years here, I was lucky enough to not be on duty. So I could travel home, spend time with my family and friends. So it was, let's say, a relaxed period, mainly. Yeah.
Okay, so if we cast our minds back to the winter of 2019, you were on duty for the final weeks of the year. Could you tell me a little bit about what you were doing and what the week leading up to the 31st of December 2019 was like?
I was on duty. I had the opportunity to telework from home, so that was nice as well, because despite I had to work, I had the opportunity to be again at home with my family and friends. I'm from a city that's called Lleida. It's very close to Barcelona. So I was the 31st of December when the first signal was detected. I began my day like random day, nothing really special, just opening the laptop, doing the regular screening activities. But again, being in the Christmas mood, it was the last day of the year. So also getting ready or having on mind that that wasn't a special day. Unfortunately, already from the morning screening activities, there were the first signals on an event that was being reported in a city called Wuhan in China. It was a cluster. By that time, there were a lot of uncertainties. So basically, the first reports, they were suggesting a cluster of pneumonia cases that they didn't have a known etiology by that time. And another additional aspect that was concerning is that there were some media sources suggesting that these cases had a common exposure to a wet market. So basically a wet market, for those that they don't know, or that they don't know even China, usually these places are really crowded with lots of people going there, products, game meat even available in these markets. So something that was posing some considerations to take into account at least.
So when you talk about these first signals, what exactly, is it just a media report or is it something else?
Precisely, a media report suggesting that, reporting these cases. Then in the afternoon already, because the way we are structuring, we are doing different rounds of screening a day. So in the afternoon already, there were the first official communications from the government from the Wuhan area, the Wuhan province, where they were confirming at least this cluster of cases. By that time, it was a group of 27 cases of pneumonia.
And that was just on the 31st. That was when those first confirmations
Exactly.
came.
So as I was saying before, the EI process, what it entails is also the verification. So that was done as soon as I could contrast this information with what it was reported by the authorities in Wuhan. But then I also had to first notify this finding to the senior officials in ECDC, because again, the scenario was deserving it. It wasn't a scenario of concern, at least, because there were a lot of uncertainties that could mean nothing or could mean a lot already by that time. So after I communicated to the managers in ECDC, we also did a quick assessment on the situation. So that assessment, by that time, it was also implicating the fact that I had to really check what was going on in this wet market where these cases were exposed. So checking that indeed there was the possibility of a zoonosis event that we would be facing by that time. Also, another aspect that was interesting, it was also to see how feasible it would be that citizens from any place of the world could easily travel from Wuhan to Europe. So another thing that we did to quickly assess that event was to see if there were direct flights connecting Wuhan with Europe. We noticed since the very beginning that there were at least connections to 3 European cities, to Paris, to Rome, and to London. Then we were also checking if there is a large community of European citizens living in the area. So we, by that time, already noticed that it is a big city, Wuhan, as you know, and that there could be quite a few Europeans residing in the area. So those were considerations that were taken into account as well when assessing the first signal and the first steps of the process.
So if we go back to this idea of a wet market being a very common place for diseases to possibly spread, is that just simply through there being a lot of people? So now when we think about COVID, we think about how it's an airborne virus. Was there any possibility that it could have been contaminated meat or anything like that?
By that time, almost all hypotheses were open. We didn't know almost anything. If you remember, it took some days until even we realized that we were facing a new pathogen. But all the hypotheses were open by that time. So the fact that the common exposure or the potential common exposure was into a wet market was only adding additional concern to the nature of the event that we were already assessing. So it's not only because it's a super crowded place, a wet market, also because there was the risk of that we could be facing a zoonosis. Not even a new one. By that time, honestly, I think that most of the people wouldn't imagine even that we would be talking about a new virus. But it could have been as well the possibility of an avian influenza outbreak, for instance. So there were a lot of uncertainties.
Just briefly, could you explain what a zoonosis is?
Yes, for sure. So in plain words, a zoonosis we should understand as an infectious disease that jumps from an animal, that could be any type of animal, a mammal, for instance, and that afterwards this jam, it infects a human being.
So after you saw the first signals coming from China, what did you do? What was the next stage after you've informed the line managers, you have a quick assessment? What did you do? Was there something, did it feel like you could forget about it and move on? Or did you think, no, this is actually quite serious?
No, exactly the second scenario that you were mentioning. That was actually something really serious that deserved close monitoring. So, of course, we were also trying to obtain additional information from other partners, contacting WHO to try to obtain more information about it. So, yeah, after we took also these steps, the decision was to monitor really, really closely the evolution of this outbreak. And actually, just a few days after there were additional reports of additional cases, the next one was on January the 3rd, where there was the confirmation of 17 additional cases already. So an additional step that we were taking was also to try to follow up all the signals regarding this incident that would help us on the assessment of the full picture. So that was meaning, for instance, signals suggesting that the city or that the wet market was closed. So meaning that the authorities were taking in place as well quite drastic activities and actions like closing down the market. That was something that helps you to understand that indeed the consideration or the hypothesis that there was a common exposure to the market is quite feasible. Otherwise, the authorities would not, for instance, be closing such an infrastructure. And all the small pieces of the puzzle that at the end helps you to make a broader picture of the scenario.
Okay, so what did you do afterwards? Did you carry on your day like normal?
Not really, because first of all, I was worried myself. Secondly, you, as a 24/7 duty officer, you had to be all the time monitoring the phone in case there were calls from anyone requesting for additional information from our stakeholders, for instance, or also monitoring the last developments that could happen at any moment. So you had to actually even enhance the screening activities that we are doing in a regular basis. So no, for me, it was from that day onwards, quite stressful duty, let's say. implicating a lot of additional activities. Also preparing already the reports because the 7th of January, there was the first roundtable meeting from the year where we had to present all the developments from that week since the first detection on the 31st of December. So yeah, it was a kind of busy.
Well, do you remember when you returned to Stockholm?
Yes, I remember. So I was traveling, I think it was on the 6th of January. Yeah.
So the next day you come into the office and the first roundtable
Exactly.
in the morning. Before COVID, what were roundtables like?
As I was saying before, usually there are meetings that where we were combining the experts. So you have to imagine a meeting with roughly 15, 20 attendees. And I remember that the first roundtable on the 7th of January, when everybody was aware, because the media, it was everywhere in the media, that something was going on in China. I remember that the list of attendees for that specific roundtable, so from other colleagues in-house in ECDC, extended a lot. There was a lot of people coming in because there were a lot of people concerned about the incident in China. So they wanted to be present during the discussions, to know more, to help as well assessing the scenario that we were facing.
Well, it's interesting to think back on it because when we have the roundtables now, they're online meetings. So at the time, it would have been strange to think back and have an in-person roundtable. It's something that's quite difficult to imagine.
Yeah.
What were the original conclusions from that roundtable? Do you remember?
Yeah, so the first conclusion was that indeed the scenario that we were facing was of concern, so that we had to perform a threat assessment brief. This is basically a document that assesses the risk that the signal that you have detected poses for the interest, again, for the European Union. And of course, by that time, there was a lot of uncertainties yet. There was a lot we didn't know. But precisely, this is already an assessment what you're doing. You're saying, okay, this is what we have observed so far. These are all the list of uncertainties we have. Therefore, here, this is our conclusion. Given this and this and this uncertainty, but this and this and this other concern, we should, and then you propose actions. So that was already the first threat assessment brief that we did, that it was published on the 9th of January. So 2 days after the roundtable where the decision to perform such a report was taken.
Generally, looking back at that first week, what are your memories of it? Did you think it was something that was going to last for a very long time or something that would blow over quite quickly?
Perhaps not the first week. Of course, there were busy times. Already we had to mobilize additional resources. There is a structure internally in ECDC that is a public health event that basically allows to mobilize additional resources. And that was already changed on this level of alert on the 9th of January, so 2 days after the first roundtable as well. So indeed, there were busy times, but not as stressful as the weeks I remember from March 2020, for instance. Those were much worse.
Did it feel like there was a collective worry within ECDC, or were there some people that felt, this will blow over, we've had public health events before, they don't last such a long time?
So again, there were probably different opinions, variety of opinions among all the experts, of course, but I would say that most of the people, they were concerned. They were concerned from what this could entail. At the end, if you are lucky enough, maybe at the end it's nothing really urgent or nothing really big and that can easily de-escalate. But at least you are already concerned and you have already this thing behind your, that you have this fear, let's say. So my feeling is that most of the people was worried since the very beginning already. Although given the scenarios and again the lot of questions that by that time needed to be answered yet, no one could imagine in early January 2020 what we were about to experience.
Looking back now 2 years on, so we're coming up to the anniversary of the first detections in Europe. Do you remember when the first cases in Europe were detected?
So the first case in Europe was detected on the 24th of January in France. And the first locally acquired cases were detected on the 28th of January. So as you can see, only a few weeks after the first signal detection in Wuhan.
When was the first time you saw developments that were considering lockdowns, travel restrictions, things like that? Do you remember when those conversations were starting?
So the lockdowns, they were already January 2020. Of course, when you see that in China, they put into lockdown a measure that it was not even used in the recent decades anywhere in the world. And they put in a lockdown cities and millions of people, you precisely notice that there is something really bad going on. Also, the first signals that we detected were the Chinese authorities were building up in a really quick manner hospitals with hundreds of beds capacity. That was something that was also posing additional concern. Basically, you were realizing that the Chinese authorities, they were facing a very unique scenario that was requiring a lot of resources from their side to implement in order to control it. And that was, worrying.
So now 2 years on, and we have seen a new variant come up, the Omicron variant. Is the reaction to variant similar to what it was like when we first saw the signals of the virus?
I wouldn't say so, because now everybody's aware of what the COVID-19 is, right? So everybody's much more reactive to any signal that, again, even if you don't know exactly the full extent of the consequences of that signal, everybody reacts much quicker to any type of signal. So I don't think it's comparable, the early stages of the reaction that we have experienced with the Omicron.
How much longer do you think we could be in this sort of COVID-19 situation? I know a lot of people always ask this question, but did you think in 2019, beginning of 2020, did you think we could be still having this conversation 2 years on?
No, I wouldn't have thought about it. And especially because I think that as a human being, at the end, you try to be positive and not realistic, but positive. So no one would have imagined, or at least myself, I would not have imagined the full dimension that this has taken. And even that after 2 years, we would be in such a situation as we are, not at least on January 2020. A few weeks or months after that, then, unfortunately, little by little, you begin to realize how the situation is and what this will entail for the future.
That's something to think about going forward. Jordi, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
We hope you found this look back at the early signals of COVID-19 informative and thought-provoking. If you would like to know more about ECDC and epidemic intelligence, please visit us at ecdc.europa.eu or follow us on social media for the latest news.